The story opens with a moment of calculated cruelty. Richard thought his timing was flawless. He thought serving divorce papers at a funeral, her father's funeral, would shatter his pregnant wife beyond repair. He wanted to see Alicia broken right there beside the casket, with thunder rolling overhead and nowhere left to run. The introduction immediately establishes the antagonist's vicious nature and the protagonist's extreme vulnerability, 7 months pregnant, grieving, drenched in rain as mourners watch in stunned silence. Richard's triumphant grin cuts through the storm as he hands her the envelope, certain he's escaping a burden, convinced she's now penniless and desperate. Then comes the devastating irony that forms the major hook. Alicia has just inherited $800 million and controlling shares of Monroe Global Industries, the very company where Richard works. Her nobody father built the empire Richard has been chasing his entire career. And Richard has absolutely no idea. The rain came down in sheets, turning the cemetery into a blur of black umbrellas and gray headstones. Alicia stood motionless beside her father's casket, one hand pressed against her swollen belly, the other clutching a single white rose she couldn't bring herself to drop. The minister's words had faded into background noise minutes ago, drowned out by the thunder that seemed to shake the very ground beneath her feet. She didn't see Richard approach. Didn't hear his footsteps squelching through the mud. She only felt the envelope pressed into her trembling hands, heard his voice cutting through the storm like a knife. "Sign these." Alicia looked up, rainwater streaming down her face mixing with tears she hadn't realized she was crying. Richard stood before her in his expensive black suit, perfectly dry under his umbrella, his expression carved from stone. "What is this?" Her voice came out broken, barely a whisper. "Divorce papers." He said it loudly enough that heads turned. Mourners gasped. Someone's umbrella fell, forgotten. "I'm done, Alicia. Done pretending this marriage means anything. Done pretending that baby is even mine." The world tilted. Alicia's knees buckled, but she caught herself on the edge of the casket. Her father's casket. The wood was cold and wet beneath her palm. "Richard, please. Not here. Not now. When else?" His laugh was cruel, sharp. "You have nothing now. No father to run to. No job because I convinced you to quit. You're completely alone." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "And honestly, I'm not even sure that child is mine. You've been looking pretty cozy with the gardener." Behind him, partially hidden by a black umbrella, a woman watched with undisguised satisfaction. Vanessa Chen, sleek and polished in designer morning wear, her red lips curved into a smirk. She caught Alicia's eye and gave a little wave. The mourners shifted uncomfortably. Several men in expensive suits exchanged glances Alicia couldn't interpret through her shock and grief. An elderly man in charcoal gray stepped forward, his weathered hand gentle on her shoulder. "Your father prepared for this, Alicia," he whispered, his voice barely audible beneath the thunder. "Trust him one more time." But Alicia couldn't hear anything except the roaring in her ears as Richard turned away, his arms sliding around Vanessa's waist, both of them laughing as they walked back toward the parking lot, leaving her shattered beside her father's grave. The house felt too quiet. Too empty. Too full of ghosts. Alicia moved through her father's modest suburban home like a sleepwalker, her fingers trailing along furniture she'd known her entire life. The worn leather sofa where they'd watched old movies. The kitchen table where he'd taught her to play chess. The bookshelf crammed with volumes on business strategy and philosophy that she'd always assumed were just hobbyist reading. She should eat something. The baby needed her to eat. But the thought of food made her stomach turn. 3 days since the funeral. 3 days of Richard's lawyer bombarding her phone with messages. Vacate the penthouse by Friday. Mr. Monroe requires an itemized list of personal belongings. Mr. Monroe insists on a paternity test. Each message felt like another slap, another humiliation she was powerless to stop. The baby kicked, a strong, insistent flutter against her ribs. Alicia pressed her hand to the spot, tears burning her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I brought you into this mess. Your grandfather would have protected you. Would have protected us both. But now there was nothing. Her father was gone. Her husband had abandoned her at the graveside. Her career in art curation was 3 years cold. She had maybe $4,000 in her personal account and a mortgage on a house she couldn't afford alone." Her phone buzzed again. Another message from Richard's lawyer, this one with an attachment: preliminary divorce terms. She was expected to sign away any claim to the penthouse, the car, even the furniture she'd picked out herself. In exchange, she'd get nothing. Zero. Richard's lawyer argued that since she'd been unemployed during the marriage, she'd contributed nothing of value. Alicia's hand shook as she set the phone down. Her gaze fell on her father's favorite reading chair by the window, the afternoon light falling across it exactly as it always had. His reading glasses sat on the side table beside a book he'd never finish. A bookmark at page 247. She walked over on unsteady legs and picked up the glasses, the metal frames still warm from the sunlight. They were reading glasses, nothing special, probably cost $20 at the drugstore. Everything her father owned was like that, modest, practical, ordinary. The sob came from somewhere deep in her chest, tearing free before she could stop it. Alicia sank into his chair, clutching the glasses to her chest, and finally let herself break completely. The penthouse sparkled with champagne and victory. Richard poured 2 glasses of Dom Perignon, the expensive stuff he'd been saving for a special occasion, and handed one to Vanessa. She accepted it with the same satisfaction she'd shown at the cemetery, her perfectly manicured nails catching the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. "To freedom," Richard said, raising his glass. "To us," Vanessa corrected, clinking her glass against his. Finally. She walked through the living room Alicia had decorated, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors, her critical gaze sweeping over every detail. "This all has to go. The beige curtains, that hideous abstract art, the throw pillows. God, she had terrible taste. Whatever you want." Richard loosened his tie, feeling lighter than he had in years. "It's all yours now." "Well, ours." Vanessa turned to him, her expression shifting to something more calculating. "Speaking of which, we should talk about money. What exactly are we working with here?" Richard settled onto the couch, spreading his arms along the back. "I make $340,000 a year at Monroe Global. Plus bonuses. Plus stock options. We're very comfortable." "And Alicia? What does she get in the divorce?" He laughed, actually laughed. "Nothing. She has nothing, Vanessa. That's the beautiful part. No job, no savings, no family money. Her father was some nobody import consultant who probably died in debt. She'll be lucky if I agree to child support, assuming that baby is even mine." Vanessa's smile widened. She crossed to him, settling into his lap with practiced grace. "You're sure about the father's money? She doesn't inherit anything?" "I'm certain. The man lived in a house that's probably worth $200,000. Max drove a 15-year-old Honda. Wore suits from department stores." Richard's expression turned smug. "I never bothered investigating his finances because there was clearly nothing to investigate. The man was invisible. A nobody. And she didn't fight back at all. Not even a little." Richard's voice filled with contempt. "She just stood there crying like the weak, pathetic woman she is. Didn't argue, didn't threaten, didn't do anything. She knows she has no power. Once she signs away her rights to this place and agrees to my terms, we're free and clear." Vanessa stood, moving to the window to look out over the city lights. "How long until the divorce is final?" 6 weeks, maybe 8. My lawyer says it'll be quick since she has no grounds to contest and nothing to fight for." He joined her at the window, sliding his arm around her waist. Then we can really start our life together. Maybe take that trip to Monaco you've been wanting. I'm thinking we should redecorate immediately, Vanessa mused. I want her completely erased from this place before the divorce is even final. Richard kissed her neck. Consider it done. Neither of them noticed the irony in the company name printed on Richard's business card, lying discarded on the coffee table beside the champagne bottle, Monroe Global Industries, founded 1995. The knock came on the fourth day, precise and professional. 3 sharp raps that somehow conveyed both urgency and respect. Alicia considered not answering. She'd been living in her father's house like a shut-in, ignoring phone calls, leaving Richard's lawyer's emails unread, surviving on crackers and water because anything else required more energy than she could summon. The baby had been restless all morning, kicking and turning as if sensing her mother's distress. The knock came again. With a sigh that felt like it carried the weight of the entire world, Alicia pulled herself up from the couch and shuffled to the door. She probably looked terrible, unwashed hair, swollen eyes, wearing one of her father's old Yale sweatshirts over her maternity leggings. She didn't care. The man on her doorstep looked like he'd stepped out of a luxury magazine. Mid-50s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car, silver hair perfectly styled, carrying a leather briefcase that screamed old money. His expression softened when he saw her, something like sympathy flickering in his professional gaze. Mrs. Monroe. Alicia Chin Monroe. She almost closed the door. Almost. If you're another lawyer for Richard. I'm not. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card, Marcus Hyland, senior partner, Hyland and Associates. I represent your father's estate. May I come in? There are matters Mr. Chin entrusted to us. Time-sensitive matters. The way he said her father's name, Mr. Chin, with genuine reverence, genuine respect, made something crack in Alicia's chest. When was the last time someone had spoken of her father like that? Richard had always called him, your old man, with barely concealed contempt. I don't understand, Alicia said, her voice hoarse from days of crying. My father didn't have an estate. He had this house and maybe some savings. His lawyer already sent me the paperwork. That was his personal attorney for basic matters. Marcus's expression remained neutral, but his eyes held something Alicia couldn't identify. I handle his business interests. It's imperative we meet, Mrs. Monroe. Your father left very specific instructions. Business interests. The word seemed absurd. Her father had been an import consultant, working from his home office, taking calls about shipping containers and customs regulations. What business interests could possibly require a lawyer who looked like he charged $1,000 an hour? But something in Marcus Hyland's manner, in the way he stood patiently on her doorstep in the afternoon drizzle, waiting for her decision, reminded her of that elderly man at the funeral. Your father prepared for this. Trust him one more time. When? Alicia asked. Tomorrow morning, if possible. Our offices are downtown, the Pemberton Building, 20th floor. He handed her another card, this one with an address embossed in gold. 10 o'clock. I can send a car if transportation is difficult. Alicia looked at the card, at the address in the financial district, at this immaculate man who spoke of her father like he mattered. Like he'd been someone important. I'll be there, she heard herself say. Marcus's expression shifted, was that relief? Thank you, Mrs. Monroe. Your father would be proud of your courage. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. Please don't mention this meeting to anyone. Not yet. Your father was very insistent about discretion. Then he was gone, leaving Alicia standing in the doorway with questions multiplying in her mind like fractals, each one more impossible than the last. The Pemberton Building rose 40 stories above the financial district, all glass and steel and power. Alicia felt small walking through its marble lobby in her only decent maternity dress, black, conservative, bought for the funeral. The security guard directed her to a private elevator that required a key card. Marcus Hyland was waiting when the doors opened on the 20th floor. Mrs. Monroe. Thank you for coming. He gestured down a hallway lined with modern art and indirect lighting. This way, please. The conference room overlooked the entire city through floor-to-ceiling windows. Alicia could see the bay in the distance, the bridges glittering in the morning sun. The table was massive, black lacquered wood that could seat 20. Only 2 chairs were pulled out. Please, sit. Marcus opened his briefcase with practiced efficiency. Would you like water? Coffee? We have herbal tea. Just tell me what this is about. Alicia's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs. Please. Marcus studied her for a long moment, and she had the distinct impression he was measuring something. Testing her. Then he pulled out a folder, thick with documents, and slid it across the table. Your father, David Chen, wasn't exactly what he appeared to be. He was an import consultant. No. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. That was his cover story. His hobby, if you will. Mrs. Monroe, your father was the founding partner and majority shareholder of Monroe Global Industries. The words didn't make sense. Alicia stared at him, waiting for the punchline, for the explanation that would make this bizarre statement logical. Monroe Global. That's Richard's company. He works there. He's a senior vice president in their European division. Monroe Global was founded 30 years ago by 2 men, Richard Monroe Sr. and David Chen. Marcus opened the folder, revealing documents covered in legal language and financial figures that made Alicia's eyes blur. Monroe Sr. handled operations and public relations. He was the face of the company. Your father provided the capital, the initial $15 million investment, and the strategic vision. He owned 60%. He insisted on anonymity to protect you. No. Alicia shook her head, the room tilting. No, that's impossible. My father lived in a modest house. He drove an old car. He wore department store suits. He was nobody. He was brilliant. Marcus's voice cut through her spiral. He built an international conglomerate worth over $3 billion, Mrs. Monroe. And he did it while remaining completely invisible, working from a home office in the suburbs, protected by layers of shell companies and legal structures designed by this firm. He pushed another document toward her. This is your inheritance. $800 million in liquid assets, real estate holdings in 12 countries, and controlling shares of Monroe Global Industries. The number was so absurd Alicia almost laughed. 800, you're lying. You have to be lying. I have 27 years of documentation that says otherwise. Marcus's expression was patient. Your father spent 3 decades building this empire while living like a middle-class consultant. He did it to keep you safe, Mrs. Monroe. To give you a normal childhood. To protect you from fortune hunters and social climbers. His voice took on a dark edge. Men like Richard Monroe Jr. Alicia's hands went numb. Richard, he doesn't know. Richard Monroe has spent his entire career at Monroe Global Industries, working his way up through nepotism and his father's connections, and he has no idea that his wife's father was his ultimate employer. That the wealth he's been chasing his entire life was sleeping beside him every night. Marcus paused. That irony was not lost on your father. Especially these last few months. What do you mean? Marcus pulled out another folder, this one marked with red tabs. His expression turned grim. Your father had been monitoring Richard's activities for approximately 18 months, Mrs. Monroe. He suspected irregularities. What we found was embezzlement. 3 years of systematic theft from Monroe Global Industries, hidden in expense reports, false vendor accounts, and offshore transfers. Conservative estimate, $7 million. The baby kicked hard, as if reacting to the spike in Alicia's heart rate. She pressed her hand to her belly, trying to breathe, trying to process information that seemed to be coming from an alternate universe. Richard stole from my father's company. Extensively. And your father documented everything. Marcus's voice softened. He was preparing to confront Richard when he had the heart attack. The stress of discovering the betrayal, according to his cardiologist, may have been a contributing factor. Richard's voice echoed in her memory, probably from stress over having a failure daughter. He knew, Alicia whispered. Before he died, he knew Richard was planning to leave me. He suspected. He hoped he was wrong. Marcus closed the folders gently. But he prepared for this possibility. Everything you need to not only survive this divorce, but to absolutely destroy the man who betrayed you, is in these documents. The question is, what do you want to do with it? Alicia looked out the window at the city spread below her, at the world that suddenly looked completely different than it had an hour ago. She thought of Richard's triumphant grin at the cemetery. Vanessa's smirk. The divorce papers demanding she vacate his penthouse with nothing. Her father's words from childhood floated back to her, something he'd said when she was learning chess: the player who looks weakest is often the one about to win the game. Tell me everything, Alicia said, her voice steadier than it had been in days. Every detail. Every option. Everything my father left me. Marcus Hyland smiled for the first time since they'd met. It would be my pleasure, Mrs. Monroe. Marcus placed a sealed envelope on the conference table between them. It was cream-colored, expensive stock, with her name written in her father's distinctive handwriting across the front. The ink was slightly smudged at one corner, as if his hand had been shaking when he wrote it. Your father left this with me 6 weeks before his death, Marcus said quietly. He made me promise to give it to you only after you'd learned the truth about the inheritance. Alicia's hands trembled as she picked up the envelope. It was heavier than it looked. She broke the seal carefully, as if the paper itself was precious, and pulled out several pages of her father's neat, precise handwriting. My dearest Alicia. If you're reading this, then I am gone and Richard has shown his true nature. I'm sorry, my darling girl. Sorry that I was right. Sorry that I couldn't protect you from this pain. But perhaps I can still give you the tools to protect yourself. You're probably confused about the money, about Monroe Global, about why I kept so many secrets. Let me explain what I never told you while I was alive. 30 years ago, Richard's father and I started a company with a simple idea and $15 million I'd made in tech consulting. Richard Sr. was brilliant at operations, at presentation, at being the public face. I was better at strategy, at seeing 3 moves ahead, at building systems that would last. We made a good team. But we had very different philosophies about family. Richard Sr. raised his son to value power, status, and wealth above all things. He taught him that money equaled worth, that success meant dominance. I watched young Richard grow up with those values, watched him become exactly the kind of man his father wanted him to be. Ruthless. Ambitious. Hollow. When you brought Richard home 6 years ago, my heart sank. I saw immediately what you couldn't yet see, that he loved the idea of you, the beauty and grace and obedience he could mold, but not the actual woman you are. I saw him calculating your worth like a business acquisition. I could have told you then. Could have revealed that I owned the company where he worked, could have warned you away. But you were so happy, Alicia. So in love with the man you thought he was. And I remembered something my own father once told me: wisdom that comes from warning is temporary, but wisdom earned through experience is permanent. So I stayed silent. I remained the simple import consultant at your wedding. I watched Richard convince you to quit your career at the museum. I saw him slowly isolate you from your friends, from your interests, from the woman you were becoming. And I documented everything. For 18 months, I've been watching Richard steal from the company I built. Watching him falsify expense reports, create ghost vendor accounts, transfer money to offshore holdings. I have evidence of embezzlement totaling over $7 million. I hired investigators. I built a legal case that would survive any scrutiny. I was preparing to confront him when my heart decided it was time for me to go. The doctors say the stress contributed to the heart attack. Perhaps. But if I had to choose between protecting you and living longer, I'd make the same choice again. By now Marcus has told you about your inheritance. $800 million. Controlling shares of Monroe Global Industries. Property across the globe. You are, quite literally, one of the wealthiest women in the country. And Richard, who has spent his entire career chasing wealth and status, never knew he married into everything he wanted. The irony is almost poetic, isn't it? Now comes the important part, my clever girl. The part where I teach you one final lesson about strategy. Don't reveal the truth yet. Let Richard think he won. Let him serve you divorce papers, let him make his demands, let him strut and preen and celebrate his freedom. Sign away the penthouse, the car, the furniture. Give him everything he asks for. Make him think you're broken, desperate, powerless. Then, once the divorce is final and he can never claim a penny of community property, you show him exactly who Alicia Chin is. You are my daughter. You carry my name and my legacy. You have my strategic mind and your mother's fierce heart. You are capable of extraordinary things, Alicia. Never let anyone, especially not Richard Monroe, make you believe you are less than you are. This inheritance is not just money. It's your birthright. It's the power to build the life you deserve, to protect the child you're carrying, to become the woman I always knew you could be. Use it wisely. Use it boldly. Use it to make Richard regret every cruel word, every dismissive gesture, every moment he underestimated you. And remember, the player who looks weakest is often the one about to win the game. I love you forever, my brilliant daughter. Take care of my grandchild. And don't forget to visit my grave occasionally. I'll be there, cheering you on. Your devoted father, David Chin. P.S. Marcus has full evidence of Richard's embezzlement. The timing of that revelation is yours to control. Choose wisely. Alicia finished reading with tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in days, they weren't tears of grief or despair. They were tears of understanding, of fury, of transformation. Her father had spent his final months building her a path through this nightmare, leaving her not just money but strategy, not just resources but revenge. She looked up at Marcus, who was watching her with that same measured expression. The divorce. How long until it's finalized? Richard's lawyer is pushing for 6 weeks. They think you're desperate and will cave to their terms quickly. And the embezzlement evidence? Ironclad. Authenticated by 3 forensic accounting firms. Enough to send him to prison for 15 years minimum. Alicia carefully folded her father's letter and placed it back in the envelope. When she looked up again, Marcus saw something new in her eyes. Something sharp and focused and dangerous. Then let's play the long game, she said. Exactly the way my father taught me. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Before we proceed, you need to understand the risks. If Richard discovers the truth too early, if he suspects even for a moment that you have money or power, his lawyers will pivot immediately. They'll claim community property, argue that the inheritance falls within the marriage period, tie you up in court for years. And he could hide or destroy the embezzlement evidence, Alicia added, her mind already racing through possibilities. The fog of grief that had paralyzed her for days was lifting, burned away by purpose. Precisely. Your father was very clear in his instructions, let Richard think he's won. Let him believe you're helpless. The moment the divorce is final, the moment he can never claim a penny of your assets, we strike on all fronts. Marcus pulled out a timeline document marked with red dates. Here's what I propose. Alicia leaned forward, ignoring the baby's restless kicks, focused entirely on the strategy taking shape before her. First, you cooperate with everything Richard demands. The penthouse. Sign it over. The car. His. The furniture, the artwork, everything Vanessa wants to redecorate. Give it all to them without a fight. Marcus's expression was grim. It will hurt. But it's necessary. To make him overconfident. Exactly. Overconfident people make mistakes. They get sloppy. Right now, Richard thinks he's dealing with a broken, pregnant woman with no resources and no fight left. We keep him thinking that. What about money? I can't afford. You have access to a discretionary account your father set up years ago. $500,000, untraceable to the main estate. Enough to cover your immediate expenses and any legal fees without raising suspicion. Marcus slid a bank card across the table. Use it carefully. Nothing extravagant. Nothing that would make Richard's lawyers take notice. Alicia picked up the card, feeling its weight, its significance. And then? You attend every mediation session looking exhausted and defeated. You accept their insulting settlement offer, whatever pittance Richard's willing to throw at you. You play the victim perfectly. Marcus's voice softened. Can you do that? Can you sit across from the man who humiliated you at your father's funeral and pretend to be powerless? Alicia thought of her father's letter. The player who looks weakest is often the one about to win the game. She thought of Richard's triumphant grin in the rain, Vanessa's smirk under her designer umbrella, the way they'd laughed walking away from her father's casket. I can do it. Good. Because the moment that divorce is finalized, everything changes. We activate your controlling shares in Monroe Global Industries. We call an emergency board meeting. And we present evidence of Richard's embezzlement to both the board and federal authorities simultaneously. He'll be fired. He'll be arrested. Marcus's expression was stone. Your father documented everything meticulously. Richard won't just lose his job, Alicia. He'll lose everything, his freedom, his reputation, his future. The man will go to prison. The word should have frightened her. Should have made her hesitate. Instead, Alicia felt something dark and satisfying settle in her chest. Justice. Or perhaps revenge. In this moment, they felt like the same thing. How long, she asked. How long do I have to pretend? 6 to 8 weeks if we move quickly. Richard's lawyer thinks you're desperate, so they'll push for a fast timeline. We let them. Marcus met her eyes. Can you hold on that long? Alicia placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby's strong, steady movements. Her child deserved better than a father who would question their paternity at a funeral. Who would abandon them when they needed him most? Who would steal and lie and betray without conscience? I can hold on as long as it takes, she said. My father taught me patience. Marcus smiled, a rare, genuine expression. He also taught you strategy. And timing. And the art of the perfect counterattack. He gathered the documents into neat piles. One more thing. You'll need to learn the business. Your father left detailed records, strategic plans, financial projections. Monroe Global Industries is about to become your company, Alicia. You should know what you're inheriting beyond the money. I want to know everything. Then we start tomorrow. 2 hours a day, here in this office. I'll bring in the CFO, the head of legal, the key players your father trusted. They've been waiting for this day, Mrs. Monroe. Your father told them years ago that eventually, his daughter would take her rightful place. Alicia stood, surprised to find her legs steady beneath her. For the first time since her father's death, she felt something other than grief. She felt purpose. Power. The beginning of transformation. Tomorrow then, she said, extending her hand. Marcus shook it, his grip firm and respectful. Your father would be very proud of you. As Alicia rode the private elevator down from the 20th floor, she caught her reflection in the polished brass doors. She looked different somehow. Still pregnant, still wearing the black funeral dress, still carrying the weight of recent grief. But her eyes had changed. They held something new. Her father had prepared for this. Had seen Richard's betrayal coming months before it happened. Had built her not just a safety net but a catapult, a launching pad into a life Richard could never have imagined. The player who looks weakest is often the one about to win the game. Alicia stepped out into the afternoon sunshine and, for the first time in a week, she smiled. The mediation took place in a grey conference room that smelled of stale coffee and ambition. Richard sat across from Alicia with his expensive lawyer, a shark-faced man named Douglas Pierce who specialized in favorable outcomes for wealthy men divorcing their wives. Richard wore his favorite suit, the Italian one that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He looked refreshed, confident, like a man who just solved all his problems. Alicia wore yoga pants and an oversized cardigan. No makeup. Hair pulled into a messy bun. She'd spent an hour that morning making herself look as defeated as possible, and judging by the satisfied smirk on Pierce's face, it had worked. "Mrs. Monroe," Pierce began, his voice professionally sympathetic. "My client is willing to be quite generous, given the circumstances." Alicia said nothing. She stared at her hands, folded on the table, the picture of exhausted compliance. "He'll allow you to keep your personal effects from the marriage, clothing, jewelry, that sort of thing. He's also prepared to offer a one-time settlement of $50,000, which we think is more than fair considering your lack of employment during the marriage period." Richard leaned back in his chair, watching her. Waiting for the gratitude. The relief. The acknowledgement that he was being generous by not leaving her completely destitute. "What about the baby?" Alicia's voice came out small, broken. "Perfect. Paternity will need to be established first," Pierce said smoothly. "Once that's confirmed, my client is willing to discuss child support. Assuming, of course, that he is the father." Across the table, Richard's expression didn't change, but Alicia saw the flash of cruelty in his eyes. He wanted her to flinch. To beg. To defend herself against his implications. She did none of those things. She simply nodded, her shoulders sagging further. "And the penthouse?" her court-appointed lawyer asked, a young woman named Jennifer who seemed overwhelmed by Pierce's aggressive tactics. "Mr. Monroe purchased that property prior to the marriage. Mrs. Monroe has no claim to it. She'll need to vacate by the end of the month. That's 4 weeks. Plenty of time to find alternative arrangements." Pierce slid a document across the table. "These are the terms. If Mrs. Monroe signs today, we can finalize everything within 6 weeks. Otherwise, this could drag on for months, getting expensive for everyone involved." The threat was clear: accept nothing or pay for a legal battle you can't afford. Alicia picked up the document with shaking hands. $50,000. No claim to any property. Paternity test required. Supervised visitation pending results. It was insulting. Humiliating. Exactly what Richard wanted. She looked up at Richard for the first time since entering the room. He was grinning. Actually grinning. Vanessa had probably picked out new furniture for the penthouse already. They were probably planning their Monaco trip. "I'll sign," Alicia whispered. Jennifer started to protest, but Alicia shook her head. "I just want this over. I can't fight anymore." "Smart decision," Pierce said, already pulling out a pen. Richard's grin widened. He caught her eye and mouthed, "Thank you." Alicia signed every page with trembling hands, playing her part perfectly. When it was done, Richard and Pierce practically bounced out of the room, already discussing timeline and next steps. Richard didn't say goodbye. Didn't look back. He'd gotten what he wanted. The moment the door closed, Alicia's trembling stopped. Jennifer was staring at her, confused by the sudden transformation. "Mrs. Monroe." Alicia pulled out her phone and sent a single text to Marcus. He took the bait. 6 weeks. The reply came immediately: "Perfect." Continue as planned. Are you okay? Jennifer asked, still confused. Alicia stood, gathering her things. I'm going to be. Over the next 6 weeks, Alicia became two different people. To the world, to Richard, to his lawyers, to anyone who might be watching, she was the defeated pregnant ex-wife, barely surviving in her father's modest suburban house. She showed up to required appointments looking exhausted. She drove her father's old Honda. She bought groceries with careful frugality. She was exactly what Richard expected, broken and irrelevant. Behind closed doors, she transformed. Every morning at 9, a black car picked her up and brought her to Marcus's office building through the underground parking garage. She spent 3 hours learning the business her father built. The CFO, a sharp woman named Patricia Reeves, walked her through 30 years of financial reports. The head of legal, Robert Chen, no relation, explained corporate structures and shareholder rights. The COO, David Morrison, taught her about operations, international markets, and strategic positioning. Your father, Patricia explained during their 5th session, was a genius at seeing opportunities 10 years before anyone else. When everyone was focused on manufacturing, he was investing in AI. When everyone rushed to social media, he was building cloud infrastructure. Monroe Global Industries isn't just profitable, it's positioned perfectly for the next decade. Alicia absorbed everything like a sponge. She studied Richard's department reports and saw the patterns her father must have seen, the inflated expenses, the mysterious vendor payments, the offshore transfers. She learned the names of every board member, every executive, every key player in the company. She also took care of herself. Ate properly. Slept regular hours. Prepared the nursery in her father's house with careful attention. The baby was due in 8 weeks, and regardless of what happened with Richard, her child would be born into security and love. Meanwhile, Richard's social media presence exploded. Photos of him and Vanessa at charity galas, restaurant openings, weekend trips to wine country. Vanessa posted constantly, #new beginnings, #living my best life, #upgrade complete. She'd redecorated the penthouse in severe modern minimalism, erasing every trace of Alicia's warmer aesthetic. Richard even reduced his settlement offer from $50,000 to $30,000, certain Alicia would accept anything. His lawyer called it reflecting her actual contributions to the marriage. Jennifer was furious, but Alicia accepted without argument. What are you doing? Jennifer demanded after that particular mediation. You're letting him walk all over you. Trust me, was all Alicia said. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in early spring. Alicia signed the final papers in the same gray conference room, wearing the same yoga pants and cardigan. Richard didn't even attend, sent Pierce instead. The whole thing took 11 minutes. I'm sorry it ended this way, Pierce said, though his tone suggested he wasn't sorry at all. Mr. Monroe wanted me to remind you that the final settlement check will be available next week. $30,000. For 6 years of marriage. Alicia took the signed decree and walked out into the spring sunshine. She sat in her father's Honda for a long moment, holding the papers that officially made her single again. Free of Richard Monroe. Free to become who her father always knew she could be. She sent a text to Marcus, "It's done." His response, "Board meeting scheduled for Thursday, 9 a.m. Are you ready?" Alicia looked at herself in the rearview mirror. 8 months pregnant, wearing cheap clothes, driving an old car. She looked nothing like a CEO. Nothing like one of the wealthiest women in the country. Perfect. She texted back, "I'm ready. Let's finish this." Richard Monroe was having an excellent week. The divorce was final. Vanessa had redecorated the penthouse into something spectacular. He'd been shortlisted for a VP promotion. Life, finally, was exactly as it should be. The emergency board meeting notification came Thursday morning while he was still in bed. Mandatory attendance. No explanation. Just a terse message from corporate requiring all senior executives in the main conference room at 9 o'clock. What do you think it's about? Vanessa asked, doing her makeup in the bathroom mirror. Probably quarterly results, Richard said, scrolling through emails. Or another merger discussion. These things are always dramatic nonsense. He dressed carefully, his best suit, Hermes tie, Italian shoes. Whatever the meeting was about, he wanted to look like the obvious choice for that VP position. He was Richard Monroe, after all. His father had co-founded this company. This was his birthright. The Monroe Global Industries headquarters occupied the top 15 floors of the Pemberton building. Richard had worked here for 12 years and never tired of the power he felt walking through those glass doors. Today, though, something felt different. The usual morning bustle seemed subdued. People were whispering. The executive conference room was on the 40th floor, a massive space with panoramic city views and a table that cost more than most people's cars. Richard arrived at 8:55, fashionably late enough to make an entrance. The board was already assembled. All 12 members, including some faces he'd only seen at annual meetings. Patricia Reeves from Finance. Robert Chen from Legal. David Morrison from Operations. And several older men Richard vaguely recognized from company events over the years. What stopped him cold was the woman sitting at the head of the table. Alicia. His pregnant, defeated, broken ex-wife. Except she didn't look broken. She wore a tailored navy suit, expensive, perfectly fitted despite her pregnancy. Her hair was styled. She wore subtle makeup and pearl earrings. She sat in the chairman's seat with the kind of natural authority Richard had spent his entire career trying to fake. What the hell is this? Richard's voice came out strangled. What is she doing here? Sit down, Mr. Monroe. Patricia Reeves gestured to a chair halfway down the table. Not at the head. Not in a power position. Halfway down, like a middle manager. I don't understand. Sit down. David Morrison's voice was steel. Richard sat, his mind racing. This had to be a mistake. Some kind of cruel joke. Alicia couldn't possibly have any connection to Monroe Global Industries. She was nobody. A failed art curator who'd spent the last 6 years being a housewife. Alicia met his eyes, and Richard felt something cold slide down his spine. She was smiling, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone about to destroy you and enjoying every second of it. Hello, Richard, she said calmly. Thank you for coming. I know this is unexpected. She stood, resting her hands on the table. Allow me to introduce myself properly. I'm Alicia Chen Monroe, daughter of David Chen, founding partner and majority shareholder of Monroe Global Industries. As of this morning, following the finalization of my divorce and the execution of my father's estate, I am the CEO and controlling shareholder of this company. The room spun. Richard gripped the edge of the table. That's impossible. David Chen was nobody. He was an import consultant. He was my father, Alicia said, her voice never rising but somehow filling the entire room. And he built this company with your father 30 years ago. While Richard Monroe Sr. handled operations and public relations, David Chen provided the capital, the strategy, and the vision. His pregnant, defeated, broken ex-wife. Except she didn't look broken. She wore a tailored navy suit, expensive, perfectly fitted despite her pregnancy. Her hair was styled. She wore subtle makeup and pearl earrings. She sat in the chairman's seat with the kind of natural authority Richard had spent his entire career trying to fake. What the hell is this? Richard's voice came out strangled. What is she doing here? Sit down, Mr. Monroe. Patricia Reeves gestured to a chair halfway down the table. Not at the head. Not in a power position. Halfway down, like a middle manager. I don't understand. Sit down. David Morrison's voice was steel. Richard sat, his mind racing. This had to be a mistake. Some kind of cruel joke. Alicia couldn't possibly have any connection to Monroe Global Industries. She was nobody. A failed art curator who'd spent the last 6 years being a housewife. Alicia met his eyes, and Richard felt something cold slide down his spine. She was smiling, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone about to destroy you and enjoying every second of it. "Hello, Richard," she said calmly. "Thank you for coming. I know this is unexpected." She stood, resting her hands on the table. "Allow me to introduce myself properly. I'm Alicia Monroe, daughter of David Chen, founding partner and majority shareholder of Monroe Global Industries. As of this morning, following the finalization of my divorce and the execution of my father's estate, I am the CEO and controlling shareholder of this company." The room spun. Richard gripped the edge of the table. "That's impossible. David Chen was nobody. He was an import consultant." "He was my father," Alicia said, her voice never rising but somehow filling the entire room. "And he built this company with your father 30 years ago. While Richard Monroe Sr. handled operations and public relations, David Chen provided the capital, the strategy, and the vision. He owned 60%. He still does. I still do." "No." Richard shook his head. "No, this is insane. You're lying." Robert Chen opened a folder. "Would you like to see the incorporation documents from 1995, Mr. Monroe? The stock certificates? The shareholder agreements? All signed by David Chen and Richard Monroe Sr. All legal. All authenticated." Richard's face had gone pale. Around the table, the board members watched him with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. These people had known. His father had known. Everyone had known except him. "My father," Alicia continued, "spent 30 years building this company while remaining anonymous to protect me from exactly the kind of person you turned out to be. A social climber. A narcissist. A thief. I'm not a thief." Patricia Reeves opened her laptop and turned it to face Richard. Spreadsheets filled the screen, highlighted in red. 3 years of embezzlement, Mr. Monroe. $7 million in fraudulent expense reports, ghost vendor accounts, and offshore transfers. We have documentation. We have authentication from 3 forensic accounting firms. We have everything." Richard's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. "You stole from my father's company," Alicia said, her voice deadly quiet now. "You stole from this board. From our shareholders. From employees who trusted you. And you did it while sleeping in my bed, eating at my table, pretending to love me." "Alicia, wait," Richard's hands were shaking. "We can talk about this. I can explain." "There's nothing to explain. The evidence is irrefutable." Alicia nodded to Robert Chen. "The documentation has been turned over to federal authorities as of 8 o'clock this morning. You'll be arrested within the hour. Corporate fraud. Embezzlement. Wire fraud. According to our attorneys, you're looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison." Richard stood so fast his chair fell backward. "You can't do this. I'll fight it. I'll sue. You'll do nothing." Alicia's voice cut through his panic like a blade. "You have no power here, Richard. You never did. You were an employee at my family's company. An employee who betrayed that trust. Security will escort you from the building. Your access has been terminated. Your assets have been frozen pending criminal investigation. It's over." 2 security guards appeared at the conference room door as if summoned. Richard looked around wildly, seeking allies, finding none. These people, the board members he'd smiled at for years, the executives he'd played golf with, they were all looking at him like he was garbage. You did this, Richard said, his voice breaking, pointing at Alicia. You manipulative bitch. You planned this whole thing. The crying at the funeral. The cooperation during the divorce. It was all an act. Alicia's expression didn't change. My father taught me strategy, Richard. He taught me that the player who looks weakest is often the one about to win the game. You were so busy celebrating your victory that you never bothered to look at what you were really walking away from. She placed her hand on her belly. $800 million. Controlling shares of a $3 billion company. And a child you'll never know because you questioned their paternity at my father's funeral. The baby is a Chen. Not a Monroe. Your name isn't going anywhere near the birth certificate. Alicia nodded to the security guards. Get him out of my building. Richard tried to resist, but the guards were professional and efficient. As they pulled him toward the door, he looked back one last time at the woman he'd thrown away like garbage. She was sitting in the chairman's seat, surrounded by the company's board, looking every inch the CEO she'd just become. Powerful. Confident. Completely transformed from the broken woman crying in the rain 6 weeks ago. You'll regret this. Richard shouted as they dragged him toward the elevator. I'll make you regret this. But his voice echoed in an empty hallway. No one was listening anymore. In the lobby, Vanessa was waiting for what she thought would be a celebration lunch. She'd worn her new Valentino dress specifically for the occasion. Richard's phone buzzed with a text, "It's over." She looked up, confused, just in time to see him being escorted out by security, his face ashen, his hands shaking. Federal agents were pulling up to the building's entrance. Vanessa's phone rang. Her publicist, probably. Or her lawyer. Someone who'd already seen the news breaking, Monroe Global Industries executive arrested for multi-million-dollar embezzlement. She deleted Richard's contact from her phone before the elevator doors even closed. 3 months later, Alicia sat in the corner office that had been her father's, leather chair, wall of windows, and a view of the city that took her breath away every morning. The baby, a girl she'd named Maya Chen, slept in a bassinet beside her desk while Alicia reviewed quarterly projections. A photograph sat on her desk beside her laptop, her father, young and smiling, standing in front of the original Monroe Global Industries building on opening day. Patricia had found it in the company archives. Her father had never displayed it, never claimed credit, never sought recognition. But he'd built something extraordinary. And now it was hers. Alicia's phone buzzed. A news alert, Richard Monroe sentenced to 18 years in federal prison for corporate fraud. She dismissed the notification without reading further. Richard Monroe was no longer relevant to her life. He was a cautionary tale. A lesson learned. A mistake she'd never repeat. Maya stirred, making the little squeaking sounds that meant she'd wake soon. Alicia pushed aside her laptop and lifted her daughter from the bassinet, cradling her against her chest. The baby settled immediately, her small hand grasping Alicia's finger. Let me tell you about your grandfather, Alicia whispered, carrying Maya to the window where sunlight streamed through the glass. He was brilliant and strategic, and he loved us more than anything in the world. He taught me that strength isn't about never falling, it's about who you become when you rise. The city sprawled beneath them, full of possibility and power. And he taught me that sometimes the people who love us most protect us in ways we never see until we're strong enough to carry the weight ourselves. Alicia looked down at her daughter, at the new life her father had made possible through his foresight and love. Behind her, the company he built hummed with purpose. Ahead of her, a future she'd never imagined stretched out like a promise. She'd fallen. She'd been broken. She'd been betrayed at the lowest moment of her life. And she'd risen stronger than anyone, especially Richard Monroe, could have possibly predicted. The player who looked weakest had won the game.